a false dichotomy of left and right, although this doesn't mean that left and right thinking is inherently flawed. What it does mean is what I repeatedly try to clarify on my channel and blog, which is how the true political spectrum is collectivism on one side, usually defined as the left, and individualism on the other.
You see, it's a false dichotomy. Left and right's a false dichotomy if you define it in a way that Rocking Mr. E doesn't define it. Because he puts Nazis on the left. So it's a false dichotomy if you define it the way that normal people define it. But if you don't put Nazis on the left, or if you put Nazis on the left where they belong, according to Rocking Mr. E, it's not a false dichotomy. I think Rocking Mr. E needs to look up what a false dichotomy is.
Collectivists reject this and try to muddy the political spectrum so that ideologies are the basis for political views, not principles and values.
Oh, and he needs to look up what ideology means, because ideology means a system of ideas and ideals, which are exactly the same as principles and values. Like, don't those words mean, or they're analogous to each other at least, right?
In a free civilization, we should not have any concern about anything other than coercion, since all that really matters is the extent that it's tolerated. Collectivists all accept certain types of coercion when it fits their agenda, and this is why we presently live in a collectivist paradigm where people spend all their time haggling over the semantics of how coercion should be exercised.
Because coercion is a hard thing to define. Like, some people think that if you pay for sex, that's not coercion. But what if you told a woman that you were her landlord and she couldn't pay the rent, that if she had sex with you, then she didn't have to worry about the rent? Is that coercion, Rocky Mr. E? I'm guessing by your views on women, no. But most women would probably not only consider that coercion, they would consider it rape.
To an individualist, liberty is inviolable. What this means is that the rights we possess aren't given to us, but are part of our very personhood. Some might question this, but as I've repeatedly shown, we aren't born into any kind of servitude unless someone tries to coerce you into accepting their rule. In nature, power is taken, and the individualist theory behind civilization has always revolved around protecting freedom from those that would exercise dominion over others. Conversely, collectivists believe that living in civilization is to sacrifice certain freedoms. They often go as far as stating that you have no freedom in a state of nature, and so should accept that any freedom you have is defined by the collective will, whatever guise this may take. This is of course false, since you're not a slave when you're born. Therefore, if you aren't a slave, the logical conclusion is you're automatically free unless someone subjugates you.
Isn't that just the most adorable little diagram right there? That little diagram he has, like, where he just moved the... It's a Republican Nazi, too. It's like, it's the elephant with the Nazi swastika on top. Isn't that adorable? Isn't it cute? First of all, like, there's so much stupid. Like, you're not a slave when you're a baby. Well, you can't take care of yourself when you're a baby, can you? You can't. You can't take care of yourself when you're a baby. Like, when do these rights... See, like, Kantian rights come from reason. So, like, when you... That's why children don't have the same rights as adults. Because children's ability to reason has not reached the adult level yet. Rocking Mr. E probably in... my girlfriend thinks he's in his 40s. His ability to reason hasn't kicked in yet either. So, but one day, there's so much stupid in here. Like, I'll put some more stuff on here, but I'm gonna juxtapose Rocky Mr. E's comments with something more intelligent, so that you can get some intelligence along with his stupidity.
Individualists prefer to build a civilization where the positives of living in nature are protected. As already explained, such positives include being born free, but also include transferring this freedom into the world around us through our labour. like planting crops or building shelter. There are obviously negatives about living in a state of nature, such as the constant threat of harm that comes with no civilized system of principles. The individualist prefers to see civilization as something that can only protect what we already have. Instead of insisting that our freedom is sacrificed for the benefit of collective support, the individualist doesn't make this demand and prefers to see civilization as a positive-sum trade. Where everyone benefits. This rules out the possibility of taking from others, no matter who endorses it. All that matters is that people don't use coercion to attain what they have. On this basis, individualists prefer to allow the pieces to fall where they may in a voluntary arrangement between individuals. Collectivists often reject the idea that the individual has any rights that aren't granted to them by authority. They also believe that coercion is acceptable, and the form this takes can vary depending on ideology. What's very apparent in collectivist ideology is the focus on the importance of the group over the individual.
While Rockin' Mr. E was talking, that dog was totally stealing his chicken nuggets. But, anyway, he's totally strawmanning collectivist arguments. First of all, there's a difference between egalitarians and communitarians. There's a difference between socialists and communists. There are neoliberals. There's even like classical liberals. Classical liberals would be too to the left for him, because the guy he's deriving his whole rights from, Locke, would be to the left of him because he placed some limitations on shit. So Locke would be to the left of him.
To these ideologues, the collective is an entity in its own right, but this is merely an abstract notion that denies the nature of reality. There is no such thing as a collective outside of human conceptualization.
This is Ayn Rand again. Like, he pulls this Ayn Rand stuff out all the time. Ayn Rand is the one who made this argument that there's no such thing as collective. Really smart libertarian philosophers never make this argument because it's stupid. Because, yeah, everything's a construct. Rocking Mr. E doesn't get that even, like, science is a construct, to a certain extent, that we created. So, like, and biology, good example, biology, the taxonomy, we created that. Like, does the fact that we made up what a mammal is change the fact of the definition of what a mammal is? The political things he's talking about, the ideologies he's talking about are constructs. Everything's a construct. He's saying that a collective has no legitimacy because it's a construct. Yeah. It just drives me insane. It's a really stupid thing. It's a really stupid thing that Ayn Rand said. And the reason you don't even hear other libertarians saying it too often is because it's stupid. And they know it's stupid. So, I don't know why he's saying it. You can have a construct, people who you are with, who you share. A voluntary construct is still a construct. And in fact, all voluntary, like the society we created that. In fact, it became voluntary to the point where we started moving toward liberal democracy and republicanism and all those things, and the ideas of rights and things like that. We didn't have those things for so long. We had monarchies and dictatorships. That's all we had. We constructed this because we thought that was bad and we wanted to create something better. So we constructed it.
Individuals are very real, however, since every person is a singular being that acts on his or her own volition. Collectives are therefore merely individuals all acting towards common goals, though often individuals are forced to be a part of this arrangement. In spite of what many a philosopher will try to suggest, the collective has no consciousness or objective separate from individual will, and so the idea that collectives can have any values in their own right is logically impossible.
Except it isn't. It is perfectly possible, because the things that overlap between you and your individual goals are the things that it has legitimacy on. That is actually the entire basis for collectivism. The idea of collective rights and all that. It's the stuff we have in common. We ignore the stuff that we have differences, and we allow people to be different in the ways they want to be different. But the things that we all value, those are the basis for rights. The things that we all value. That is the basis for Kantian ethics, treating others as ends in themselves, not merely as means to an end. That is what Kantian ethics is about. So, that is what collectivism based on those ethics would be about, which is my personal view. Now, there's lots of other views. There's Marxism and other views. He would just call what I believe in another form of Marxism, is what he'd do. Because everything's Marxism to him. Because Marxism is very easy to knock down compared to other ideologies, because it has some baggage, some historical baggage, and it's got all these Hegelian ideas that are, first of all, hard for people to understand, easy to straw man, and because it's been used in very dogmatic ways before. So it's much easier to knock down Marxism. That's why he makes everything into Marxism.
Philosopher Isaiah Berlin once described liberty as either positive or negative. Negative liberty is the name given to the type of liberty that individualists ascribe to. It espouses an absence of coercion and a respect for individual autonomy. This is considered negative because no one can actually do anything unless they're capable of achieving it on their own merits and without the use of coercion. Positive liberty is the opposite of this, given that actions can be justified if one believes it will lead to liberty, even if it means taking from others. This is what collectivists believe. Isaiah Berlin didn't necessarily reject positive liberty, but he did believe that this led to a slippery slope towards authoritarianism.
Now, slippery slope is a fallacy. I can't believe that so many people use it when they speak. Because that's the whole thing of Throckmorton Mystery. Everything leads to totalitarianism. Everything. Anything but... Somebody told me in a comment earlier that he's a minarchist. And he might have a video where he does claim he's a minarchist. Maybe he was an anarcho-capitalist and became a minarchist. But his arguments are all anarcho-capitalist arguments. Because they start to fall apart if any state apparatus exists at all. If any state exists at all, they start to fall apart. So, I mean, they're not that great anyway, but, I mean, they're in real problems if you have, like, a minimal state. So, like, the slippery slope idea. Like, but the idea, he is correct. Berlin is the one who gave us the idea of negative versus positive rights, because you had this idea, like, you had this conflicting idea from Locke and Hume and Mill. Then this, on the other end of the spectrum, you had Kant and Rousseau. So he like defined the differences between these two things. And it's true that he was less worried about the negative liberty than the positive liberty. But that was only because he was worried about how you justify what positive liberty is. If he thought if you could find ways to justify it, then that would not be abused, then it would be okay.
Revolutions are inevitably founded on the basis that violence and struggle can create a positive outcome, but this is never the case. Violence begets violence, and the same can be said for coercion or any other action. This is why it's foolish to think that violent struggle can ever amount to a positive outcome.
Okay, a couple things he said here that are just kind of weird. He just says coercion and violence are the same thing, which is kind of thing like when I made the example before, like the woman like coercing her into having sex with you, like a lot of these guys are the same guys who are like, oh, that's not rape. Like, coercion's not rape. These are the same guys. So, like, the kind of idea of coercion, like, economic coercion does not exist, or even, like, psychological coercion. It's only when you do violence is coercion. Only when you use physical force. Anything else isn't coercion. And that is such a narrow idea of what coercion is. It's ridiculous. It's such a narrow idea. And he's like, oh, leftists want to have an argument about what coercion is, and that's just stupid. It's like, yeah, because there's different kinds of coercion. I could coerce you pretty easily if I had, like, a lot of economic power over you without ever using violence or even the threat of violence. Very easily. So, once again, it's like coercive violence. Plus, also, I would actually say, like, the idea that nothing could come good could come from a violent out. Now, violence is not preferable, but, like, obviously there's exceptions to that rule. That, like, violence may be necessary at certain times. He's obviously not talking about things like self-defense and things like that. But some people could argue that oppression in an extreme form could be self-defense. And I'm sure even he would argue that. Like, if he lived in a monarchy where the sovereign had complete power and the sovereign was taking away his rights, then he would use violence, wouldn't he? So I'm sure that he wouldn't. So I'm not even sure what exactly he's talking about. It's like he's ill-defined as usual. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about?
What we can say for sure, though, is that the more violent the struggle, the more violent the outcome. We can see this when we look at the French Revolution and the Reign of Terror, which resulted in tens of thousands being executed, or with Marxist revolutions, where people were slaughtered in their millions. Only one revolution even came close to a truly positive outcome, and that was the American Revolution, which led to the most prosperous nation in human history.
Oh, there it is, the exception. See, like, he does this all the time. He says never. It makes absolute, and then makes an exception. You can't do that. You have to say, you can say that on general terms something like this is true and then have some caveats. But, like, when you're saying never, something can never happen, then you can't have caveats after that when you're making an absolute statement, because people are going to come up with other caveats too. Why the French Revolution, though, like, the French Revolution was people being oppressed by the monarchy. He's not for monarchy, is he? Like, the people coming up, the only reason he seems to be defending that is because it was about economics. But the American Revolution is about economics too. I don't know how it's taught in England. I have no idea how it's taught. But I have a feeling that Rocket Mr. E watches a lot of American media and gets, like, a lot of American, reads a lot of American writers and a lot of American, all our crazy shit, basically, all our crazy right-wing shit, because that just doesn't exist in England. And he's, like, parroting them back and forth. Like, England has its crazy right-wing people, but they're distinct from our crazy right-wing people. And he seems more like influenced by the American crazy right-wing people. And still not sure whether he's in England or the United States, because he contradicted himself and said he was in the United States in some videos and some in England. But I studied the backgrounds and had other people study the backgrounds, and, like, it seems more likely he's in England, in Wales or somewhere else in the UK. I don't know where he's got, like, this obsession. He's talking about how great America is. It's like the greatest civilization. Almost all his examples are like the United States. I don't think he's ever been here, to tell you the truth, because he doesn't talk like someone who knows the United States at all.
The reason for this becomes very apparent when we note that the principles driving the revolution were derived from John Locke above all, who was an early advocate of inviolable natural rights, or what Isaiah Berlin called negative liberty. In contrast, the decline of the US correlates with repeated reinterpretation and amending of the US Constitution by those that have no respect for negative liberty.
Okay, most prosperous period in recent U.S. history of the last century is when our taxes were the highest. Our taxes were the highest in our regulations on business. After the Depression, after World War II, most prosperous period. The top marginal income tax rate for people making over $800,000 a year in 1947 is over 90%. I believe it's like something like 96, 97%. I'd have to look it up to get the actual numbers. You can look it up, but I know it's over 90%. That's because we just got through the Depression. We had to pay for the war. Everyone was sacrificing for the war. When we had these wars in Iraq and things like that recently, the rich didn't sacrifice anything for those wars. In fact, they profited from them. It's the deregulation and the things the deregulation and the lowering the taxes on the rich that are doing it. History proves it, because the most prosperous times are when we had the most regulation and the highest taxes. Right now we have record low taxes, record low regulation. And if we're declining, that's why. It's been happening since the late 70s. Then Reagan became president, and it just hit high gear. Clinton made it even worse when he was president. This guy, like, he's talking about someone else's country. And I don't think he's ever been here. And he's been living in the UK where, you know, you have your problems. But, like, not like the problems we have, and then paying, like, lip service to these ridiculous ideologies that sprang from this stupid country. One philosopher, British philosopher, I don't remember his name, said that America is where every fallacy goes to be born anew, or every dead fallacy goes to be born anew. And, like, that's why we have the craziest rhetoric here in the United States. It just seems to be true. Like, the craziest stuff, the craziest religions, the craziest politics, because just every stupid idea comes to America.
The decline of individualism in the West coincides with the abandonment of negative liberty for a consequentialist and morally relative approach. Neoconservatism in the US shows how bad this has become, though the same pattern can be seen in countries all over the West, including the UK.
Alright, I'm not going to go through this bullshit anymore. It's just the same shit. His version of relativism is ridiculous. He's a consequentialist. Watch my very first episode about relativism if you want to see me bash him on the relativism thing, and on Nietzsche too. The second episode on Nietzsche, where he doesn't understand what relativism even means. Consequentialism, you can watch any of my videos where I talk about how he's a consequentialist who constantly is decrying consequentialism and then making consequentialist arguments. It'll probably come up in later videos because he makes them in almost every video. It's insane for him to say that. As for the Nazi elephant that is now on the other side, because he's showing the original paragon that he says that we use, like, that is just, it's ridiculous. It's a childish fucking idea of what politics are like. It's childish. I don't know how else to describe it.
Michael Sandel is a philosopher that advised George Bush Jr. during his time in office. And when we examine his views, we can see that there's little difference between his attitude and that of other consequentialists centered on positive liberty. This muddying of liberty results in three outcomes. First, it leaves individualists feeling totally unrepresented. Second, it means that all choices lead to collectivism in one form or another. And finally, it perpetuates a lack of understanding regarding what right-wing is actually supposed to represent.
See, it is a false dichotomy, but he doesn't really understand it, because there's like anarchism and statism on one side, like the two extremes on one side, and then there's like authoritarianism and libertarian on the other side. So, like, you can be in a lot of different places on that spectrum. So it's actually like the political compass that I've seen online is actually the closest to like giving you an idea of like where it's not perfect either though. But that's why like anarchists, there's left anarchists and right anarchists. Like there's Marxist anarchists, and then there's anarcho-capitalists. They want the same thing, but they believe, one of them believes that not having a state will force people to cooperate more, and the other believes that not having a state will force people to compete more. And his solution is to just take Nazi elephant and put him when he's over here or over here, and then move him over here. That's his solution, to take Nazi elephant and put him on the opposite side than he was before. And he's like, that fixes it. Still under false dichotomy because I moved Nazi elephant to the other side.
Liberty is just a word, but words have meaning, and this meaning drives ideas. People can try to redefine the meaning of words, but ideas are bulletproof and won't simply die if the meaning of a word is appropriated. This is why those of us that believe in negative liberty, individualism, inviolable rights, and other concepts necessary in a world free of coercion need to continuously push back against those that would sideline our values. While this may seem like an uphill struggle in the present collectivist paradigm, we should take heart in the fact that any system built on coercion can never truly last. It's therefore imperative that individualists create their own communities and subcultures centered on concepts like negative liberty to show others how prosperous these values are, and so these ideas can outlast collective tyranny.
I've said this on other videos. I reject the term liberty because what we're talking about is kind of like freedom, and liberty is a specific kind of freedom to me because it comes from Hume's ideas about free will and Locke's ideas about free will, which is libertarianism. And that is the idea that you're free as long as you are able to do what you want to do right now. So when he said earlier, like, a baby's not a slave when they're born, but yeah, babies can like react to what is going on, the stimuli that's going on, but that's not any kind of freedom. Autonomy, coming from Rousseau and Kant, is like more complex, whereas like you wouldn't really have that until you're able to reason and able to make decisions based on reason for yourself, which is why like a baby wouldn't be free when they're born by Kantian standards. I don't know how anyone can think a baby's free. It just like sounds like an insane concept, and like a lot of people react that way to it too. It's like a baby's not free, but autonomy is different, and I've explained this before. Like, which would you rather have? More decisions, or just not have anything you want to do at any given time restricted? Because autonomy is about giving you more decisions. Collectivism is about giving you more decisions. That idea is a government. Whether you believe in socialism or you believe in kind of a mixed regulated capitalism, which might, like, the thing about socialism is like, yeah, I think the government should control things. Like, I think they should have, the people should own, like, things like energy and healthcare. That it should be owned by the people, not by corporations. That's my belief on it. But I don't want to crush capitalism completely, which some socialists do. Because I've never defined that in anything I've talked about. So it's not like that far from well-regulated capitalism. But Rocket Mr. E's kind of freedom is based on like your just natural abilities that you're born with. So if you're born with special abilities, the thing is, like, about most of these far right libertarians I encountered, they would be the first people in like a society they want to get, they would be crushed by that society. Because look at Rocket Mr. E. Like, what skills does he have? Like, what cognitive abilities does he have that would lead to success? A lot of people even will say he's a shitty guitar player. I don't play guitar, so I don't know enough to like know, but it doesn't sound really good. But what abilities does he have? Other than pissing people off on YouTube, that would lead to success in his form of government. That's the thing. It's like these people are advocating for something I don't even really know if they realize what the implications of it is. Though I have some problem with John Rawls, Rawls has a concept in his social contract theory which is called the veil of ignorance, which is this idea that you don't know what you're going to be. Like, you're like, it's a thought experiment where everyone's waiting to be born, and you don't know what you're going to be born. You don't know whether you're going to be a man or a woman. You don't know what race you're going to be, what country you're going to live in, anything like that. And of those two kinds of freedom, as I define them, liberty and autonomy, which one would you pick? Because I've asked that question independent of the veil of ignorance before, on different episodes of the series. But if you had to pick between autonomy and liberty without knowing whether you're going to be rich or poor, male or female, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, what country you're going to live in, whether you're going to be disabled or not, whether your parents are going to be good parents or absolute horrible people. Like, without knowing any of those things, which kind of freedom do you want? And there's really only one answer that is honest. Anyone who wants the other kind of freedom, given that choice. The only reason people want the libertarian version of freedom is either they think it's to their advantage, which it usually isn't, or it is to their advantage, which only the very rich is it to their advantage, that form of freedom. All libertarian is, it's deontology, or it's disguised deontology. It's really consequentialism, but whenever there's anything that could possibly hurt the rich, there's rules to protect the rich. It's completely about protecting the rich. Those rules of libertarianism are to protect the rich. That's what it's about. That's why it hasn't been like very popular historically in philosophy, because most people are too smart in philosophy to fall for it. It's like 6.6% of philosophers are libertarians. I know this strikes you as an appeal to popularity, some of people, but egalitarianism is the biggest percentage of philosophers, political philosophers, and philosophers in general. The biggest section, when they ask them, what do you lean toward, it's egalitarianism. Then it's communitarianism, which is slightly different than egalitarianism, but it's still like about community and collective rights. And then other is actually the biggest. It's like 40% are in others. But libertarianism is 6.6%. Because smart people, when they get out in the world, don't fall for libertarian. In fact, a lot of people who claim to be libertarians aren't really libertarians. A lot of people who claim to be libertarians are paleoconservatives who are really dumb and or crazy, and or classical liberals. Like, a lot of people who claim to be libertarians, I bet you, like most people who follow me or comment on my videos who think they're libertarians or call themselves libertarians, I bet you aren't. I bet you're a classic liberal when you really examine your views. Don't be stupid. Like, question your ideas and evolve and think. Don't accept this kind of dogma that leads to stupidity, like rocket mystery, no matter what you believe. Because if you're just taking in other beliefs and just reevaluating your own beliefs, then you're on the right track, no matter what your beliefs are.